Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak on the Fair Work legislation amendment, Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill 2022. The Secure Jobs Better Pay legislation will deliver more secure jobs, better pay and a fairer workplace relations system for Australian workers. How Labor is that? That's light on the hill stuff, modern day light on the hill stuff, so LED lights obviously. Because Deputy Speaker, I want to talk briefly about two things that this bill is designed to do. Firstly, banning pay secrecy clauses, and then the second thing is bargaining, something that I've had some experience working for the Independent Education Union, particularly dealing in the Christian schools sector, where you sit down and actually look at awards and look at enterprise bargaining agreements. Also some of the independent standalone First Nations schools in Queensland that I did enterprise bargaining with many years ago. One of the key objectives of this bill will be to help close the gender pay gap, a great thing to do. All sensible Australians know that women should not be paid less than men. But we need to move from just agreeing and nodding to actually doing something about that. This bill aims to ban secrecy clauses so that companies cannot prohibit staff from talking about their pay if they want to. These clauses have long been used to conceal gender pay discrepancies, and we would hate for any future female workers to be discriminated against, wouldn't we? I'm sure we could all agree. Banning pay secrecy clauses will improve transparency, reduce the risk of gender pay discrimination and empower more women to ask their employers for pay rises. Over the weekend, I attended the Queensland State Labor Conference on the Sunshine Coast. The conference was addressed by many people, including the Prime Minister and the Premier, but particularly by a woman with professional experience in both the public and private sector. Her first job was in the Queensland Public Service when she was 17 years old. As an AO1 in the state public service, her salary and conditions were known and aligned with people doing the same work. The pay of her co-workers and bosses was made public and transparent, and staff were free to discuss their salaries openly. Leaving the government some years later to work in the private sector, she soon learnt that transparency around pay and conditions did not exist. Over the years, she has had contracts that prohibited her from talking about her pay. She's had to negotiate her own employment contract, salary and conditions, unsure of what deals her colleagues and peers had secured, fearful of asking for too much, anxious and always unsure if she was underselling herself, and completely relying on the goodwill and blind hope that her employer would do the right thing by her. In her own words, she made this very clear point, and I quote, "If we can't see something, if we can't talk about something, if there's no transparency, it inhibits our ability to organise, to advocate and to get a better deal." End quote. Multi-bargaining is already possible under the Fair Work Act through those three streams: single interest, multi-employer and low paid. The problem is, Deputy Speaker, if you look at the data, we know that the system isn't working. Wages have flatlined for nearly a decade, while profits have actually soared. And productivity has increased. I wouldn't say soared, but it's increased. So something is not working. Under this bill, we aren't creating new streams of bargaining. We're varying the existing streams to make them workable and to get wages moving, something that we took to the election loudly and proudly. The largest aged care provider in Queensland, Blue Care, has offered workers a 2% wage increase and has made no attempt to lift the offer despite being forced by workers to the bargaining table.
Shame.
Now, I just want to touch on that bargaining table for a second, because when I did do enterprise bargaining, I sat at a table with employers, with the workers I represented, sat at the table, and I'm sure the member for Blair would have done the same thing, sitting at a table. Nowadays, I'm told, I've been here a while, but nowadays there's no table because people actually meet virtually, and there's no bargaining anymore. No, because of that gap between EB and awards, bosses basically say your wages can fall off a cliff if you don't take what I'm giving you. Basically, one step away from coercion, where your wages fall off a cliff, your conditions fall off a cliff, so there's no more bargaining, no more table. We need to bring back the bargaining table. Now, back to Blue Care. The aged care provider, run by Uniting Care, employs thousands of aged care workers who do incredible work, but they've steadfastly refused to improve its offer, despite inflation running at about 7% in Brisbane, and other major aged care providers giving workers pay rises well north of 4%. Frustrated blue care workers stand testament to a broken bargaining system that has ended after months of protracted negotiations in stalemate. That's not the way to run an industrial relations system. You think of all that effort, all that goodwill for nothing, all that goodwill and innovation curdling into rancour in a workplace. In early October, blue care workers voted down the company's continued 2% offer and are now waiting for negotiations to resume in their quest for a fair pay offer. And if you know these workers, if you've met these workers, how could you look them in the eye and say this system is working? This system is working. It's ridiculous. The issues facing blue care workers demonstrate across the nation the difficulty in bargaining when the bargaining does not involve the ultimate decision-maker on aged care workers' wages, in this case the federal government being present at the bargaining table. It also illustrates the current ability of employers to play out a negotiation endlessly with no actual obligation at any stage to come to a final acceptable position. Labor's Secure Jobs, Better Pay legislation will deliver on a range of commitments that we made at the 22 election and at the Jobs and Skills Summit. Don't be misled by people saying that we did not take this to the election and that we did not take it to the Jobs and Skills Summit. We want our reforms to modernise Australia's workplace relations system, get wages moving and achieve gender equity for Australian workers. Because we all know that Australian workers have been doing it tough. And for the last 10 years, Australians had a government that deliberately kept their wages low. Remember that? Shame. Remember that? The former finance minister belling the cat and saying that's a deliberate design strategy. Something that just came out of his mouth as if it meant nothing, but think of the misery visited on households by that commitment by the Liberal and National Party, the sort of reform friend of the workers from the 22nd of May. The Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison governments did nothing to close the loopholes that have made Australian jobs less secure. But the Albanese government is taking the opposite approach, because the Albanese government believes in giving workers a better deal and a better future. We believe in Australians, and I commend Labor's legislation to the House because I still believe in the light on the hill.
I thank the honourable member for his contribution and give the call to the honourable member for Goldstein.